Hello, hello, and welcome back to DFT's Dungeon. I'm Daniel Terry, and this week I have got a massive video for you guys. This is a 95-minute conversation with Andrew Schwab of Project 86, or now known as P86 Omni. Andrew and I kind of go the full gamut in this conversation. We start off talking about science fiction. We talk about Andrew's transition from being the singer of a rock band to being the singer of a cyberpunk metal band. We talk about his creative inspirations. We talk a lot about Omni Part 3. We talk about crowdfunding, and I did my best to ask questions that I thought that you guys might have for Andrew about Omni Part 3 and what we can expect going forward. And I want to apologize just right off the bat. I was having some internet problems when we were recording this. So that did result in a little bit of blurry video quality and things like that. I've done my best to minimize the effects of that, but if the video looks kind of choppy, I apologize, guys. But I would just assume that you guys are mostly just listening to this interview as it is, and you're probably not watching it in, 8K on a 75-inch television. So this is going to be my last video for 2025, but don't worry, I will be back in 2026 with more videos about bands, more band list videos, more musical evolution videos. I don't normally do interviews, but Andrew Schwab has increasingly become one of my favorite people to talk to. So I'm going to shut up now so you guys can listen to me and Andrew talk all about Omni Part 3. All right. Right before me tonight is one Andrew Schwab of P86 Omni. Andrew, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing all right, man. Thanks for having me again, good sir.
This has been quite the announcement of Omni Part 3.
It has been quite the announcement. I'm still living in the middle of it.
Yeah, I feel that. I've been trying to put myself out there online more
Mhm.
while actually in real life trying to retreat from online more. And a lot of it is inspired by your albums. Omni Part 1 and Part 2 very much affected me on a fundamental level.
Causing you to retreat from all
Yes.
things digital?
Absolutely. We all know that algorithms and stuff are harvesting our data.
Mhm.
And we know that they are basically making us dance like puppets. That's something that's interesting about you mentioned the word content creator earlier before we were recording. That's
Mhm.
the funny thing about content creation is we're all kind of dancing like puppets. We make the content for free so that these websites will promote us. But really, we're the ones that are keeping the other users engaged. They're scrolling to get to the free content that we make,
Right.
but the companies themselves are the ones that actually end up benefiting in the end. So we do the work for free. Everybody engages with us, but at the end of the day, the person that profits is whoever is behind the machine, so to speak.
Yeah, for sure.
So, in the spirit of that, I'm going to get into my first question. I don't normally write down interview questions, but
I'm honored that you did.
well, here's the thing. For an interview with a band dude, no, I'll just do it. But see, now I'm not just interviewing a band dude, I'm interviewing a science fiction writer
I
and
don't
a
think of
musician.
myself that way.
You've written a science fiction book, which we're going to get into.
Yeah, this is
So,
true.
alrighty. Well, without further ado, I'm going to get into my first question. What got you into science fiction?
That's an interesting one. That's a deep one, dude. And it forces me to think back a little bit. I suppose, as a child of the 80s, all of the Star Wars, Star Trekness was integrated into my DNA, like so many other of my friends and peers. But that wasn't really what lit the fire. I think it was honestly like in my early 20s when the band started touring more. I started reading more books. And while I always had an affinity for all things, futuristic, futurism, and sci fi, it wasn't until I started going back and rereading a lot of the books that I grew up reading in school that I started realizing how much the predictions that were made by people like Aldous Huxley, and obviously everybody knows, the George Orwell 1984 story, and how much that's been an influence on popular culture along the way. But in rereading a lot of those types of works in the late 90s, I really started seeing how these guys had gotten it right. That had written in a forecasting or prophetic voice about the future. And it was really kind of uncanny to me to see that. And that's what started me, I guess, viewing the world through a little bit different lens. Because when you start projecting forward the trends that are happening currently, and you just basically imagine, okay, if this variable continues down this path, this is what the world is going to look like. And you start applying that to, everything in our lives. You start realizing that there's a picture that you can see. And that's the element of sci-fi, futurism. People use other words, dystopia. I call it just a prophetic voice or a futurism voice. That's the part that's fascinating to me is how all of these works of sci-fi, and now we see countless amounts of media out there that are in these realms. That's the part that's really interesting to me, because people are basically taking the details of what our current reality is and projecting that forward into a new reality that might or might not come to fruition. And that's all that I've been doing inside of a lot of my work in recent history. But getting back to your original question, and trying not to get too far ahead of myself, you really saw this play out on our third record, Truthless Heroes. All of the things that I just mentioned, this idea of forecasting and looking at trends and looking at the direction where certain things in our world are headed, and making a hypothesis about how a future picture might look, if that makes sense.
Totally. Yeah, you just rolled right into my next question, which is perfect. Which I was going to ask, in what ways has science fiction sort of intersected with your music career prior to Omni? Is there anything outside of Truthless Heroes where you have sort of injected? I know it's hard because we're going back on like so many
Hmm.
years worth of history and things that
Right.
you've written down in notebooks places, and sometimes it can be hard to trace back. But I was just wondering if there were any notable examples of sort of hints that maybe you might be going in this direction later on in your career.
I mean, Truthless Heroes was the only moment that I actually committed to it a little bit more. Ever since then, it's always been a hankering or an itch that I didn't really scratch, but it's something that I really wanted to look at in a manner where I committed myself to it, right? And you're asking if there are moments throughout, the trajectory of my career where there are evidences that maybe I was starting to go this direction, or songs or lyrics and such. I mean, there's little things, on our fourth album, Songs to Burn Your Bridges By, there's like a little Matrix reference in that song. I say the phrase, "I've unplugged the wires from your spine." So it's always kind of been there, but I never really committed to it, if that makes sense. So over the years, it's kind of built up. And that's where all of the Omni passion came from, is this idea that I could create this world that was based upon our actual reality, that makes commentary about the world that we're in now and the world that we're creating moving forward. And there's this intersection of fantasy and reality, and the seen and the unseen type of thing. And I've always been very interested, dating back to, I would say, the mid 90s, in our relationship with technology, because we live in such a unique time where we're seeing so much acceleration. Right. If you look at the trajectory of human history, not much changed until the 20th century. And then when the industrial age hit, it's been one innovation after another that's seemingly rewritten the entire story of human history. And now it's happening every day, you know, which is the nature of technology. It just accelerates.
Do you think it maybe is just because, we developed kind of the technology that we had to survive, you know,
Right.
and now it's almost like we've sort of beaten, well, in at least in certain parts of the world, we've beaten the survival part of it. And now it's like I think we started relying on our technology to not only just entertain us, make the time go by. We've just sort of used it to defeat boredom
Hmm.
and to provide us with almost every need that we could have.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, there are so many different angles to this, right? The problem with technology in general is the same problem with human nature in general. It's that while we are capable of doing good things, we are also very capable of doing really bad things. And so you see both realities simultaneously. And I would argue that the bad many times outweighs the good, because your interpretation of all of this kind of hinges upon whether or not you believe, man is inherently good, or is he inherently selfish. And I believe the latter, based upon a lifetime's worth of evidence, which sounds negative, but it's actually not. It's just the truth that if there is something higher, it exists outside of ourselves, right? I'm convinced of the answer to that, but there are a lot of people that are not. And that's the fun thing about a discussion about anything technological and our relationship to it, is because all we're really discussing is our own creation. That's all technology is a mirror of ourselves. It's ourselves looking back at us, which is why it's really fun for me to explore this whole transhumanism topic and singularity and artificial intelligence. How does that relate to, God and us attempting to replace him and such? There's a lot of Ridley Scott in it. And you asked about my initial influences dating back. A lot of Ridley Scott, a lot of Philip K. Dick, a lot of the obvious Brave New Worlds and such, but anything that sort of explores the relationship between man and his creator, man and himself, and man and technology, and how those three things sort of work together, I'm interested in.
Yeah, for sure. I saw Blade Runner whenever I was very young, probably
Mhm.
too young uh, to watch that
Yeah,
movie.
same.
And
I was a little disturbed by the scene where he shoots the girl in the back when she's running away and she's wearing that rain jacket, the clear
yeah,
rain jacket. There was something about that scene that was so disturbing. Like the shot, like I was a kid when I saw it. The shot of her just laying there dead and knowing that she's like an android. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Yeah.
there's just something very deeply unsettling about
Yeah.
it.
Uh-huh.
And even as a kid, I remember kind of being weirded out by just the idea of like machines walking among us,
Yeah.
pretending to be us. That's
Totally.
always weirded me out on a very fundamental level. And then, of course, years later, whenever I started watching Battlestar Galactica, it got worse, right? It's like who's a Cylon, who's not a Cylon, right?
Mm-hmm.
That sort of thing is always kind of, I think, from a very young age, has kind of had me pause a little bit with technology because I'm always sort of waiting for the other shoe to drop. Like, I always ask myself, what is the cost of the convenience?
Totally. That is the question. That's the ultimate question. And it's not one that we ask very often. And I've said this so many times on the podcast. If you guys are listening and you want to hear more of this discussion, I have to do my shameless plug to join us on Patreon, patreon.com/P86Omni. But I've said this a million times on the podcast over there. So anyone who's listening will recognize this quote because I bring it up a lot. It's one of my favorites. Jeff Goldblum, Jurassic Park. Everybody's reveling in the fact that they made dinosaurs. And it was so impressive because they're so real. And we, as an audience and watching the movie, were reveling in the fact that they had finally, through CG, made believable looking dinosaurs on screen. And I
Yeah.
remember watching this in the theater and just being like, wow. And this is a sidebar, but I don't know if you experienced this or not, or you remember this or not. But before they released that film, they didn't show any of the dinosaurs on any of the trailers or any of the media.
Yeah.
It was a huge mystery. And when you finally got in the theater, you still didn't know what you're getting yourself into because of the setup for the first 20, 30 minutes of the film or whatever. And then you finally get that scene where you're looking at the brachiosauruses and they're so real and the actors on camera just nailed it.
Yeah.
What's his name? I forget his name, but
Sam Neill,
yeah, and what's her name?
Laura
She's
Dern.
yeah,
Yep.
miscast in Star Wars.
Hmm.
Laura Dern. They nailed that scene. It was just a moment, but the second layer to it had nothing to do with dinosaurs. It had to do with the fact that we had reached a stage in history where CG was now possible in terms of making something absolutely lifelike on
Yeah.
screen, right?
Yeah.
And Jeff Goldblum says right after that scene when they're all sitting around just freaking out about how they can market the dinosaurs, right? Genius. He says, obviously he didn't write it, but the delivery is so good. He says, you were so busy worrying about whether or not you could, you didn't stop to think whether or not you should.
Yep.
And that's what we do every single time. We don't think about how social media is going to absolutely destroy the mental health of generations of people. We just think about how we can monetize it. You know what I mean? We as
Oh
humans,
yeah. Oh yeah.
how can we monetize that? How can we make it as addictive as possible? The
Yep.
social dilemma, if you've ever seen that doc
Yeah.
on Netflix.
Yeah, and it's terrifying, and I'm experiencing, like, we we talked for probably about 15 minutes before we started recording, and I was talking about, I've kind of gone through that myself, is that sort of addictive, that pull of, "Ooh, I have this platform, and if I say a thing like this, or I do a thing like this, then I might get this type of interaction." And what I've learned, through doing a YouTube channel is that at first you think it's about pleasing other people, right? To get people to watch, or to listen, or subscribe, or whatever, right? By the way, if you
Yeah.
haven't subscribed to this channel, you should absolutely
You should
subscribe to this
subscribe
channel.
just for the skin alone that you have. The font mixed with the 80s BG. I love the color scheme and the whole thing. It's great. It's
Thank
great.
you.
I
Thank
love
you.
it. Love
I
it.
got a little carried away in Canva earlier today,
It looks
and
beautiful.
thank you. I appreciate that. Now I have to use this for every interview I do after this.
Is this the first time you've used this one?
Yeah, I've never used this one. So originally, whenever I logged in, full disclosure, if you guys like hearing me and Andrew specifically talking about sci-fi, we've done that several times already, on the
We
Patreon.
have a series on the P86 Patreon where we talk about Black Mirror episodes.
Yep,
And we also did Bandersnatch, the film.
we did.
And it's sort of open ended. I'm assuming at some point we'll do more. I just
Yeah,
haven't hit you up recently about it, but I feel like we should now that hopefully we'll get some more folks coming in because of the new album campaign.
absolutely. But yeah, like, what I have experienced is you start figuring out that it's less about pleasing other human beings to get them to like you and follow you. You start figuring out, how do I please the algorithm?
Hmm.
And before you know it, you went from being a functioning member of society, of somebody that does things for other people, right? Because
Hmm.
ultimately, we go to work every day, we do jobs, and we are part of society to where our jobs are designed to help people in some way. Either that is to sell people things that they need, like food, or to give them services like hospitalization, and
Hmm.
things like that. We all have our own roles, right? And but we're still sort of serving society. We're serving humanity when we're doing that.
Yeah.
But whenever it becomes about pleasing an algorithm, all of a sudden now I'm subservient to a automated process,
Right.
right? And that automated process, like you said earlier, Andrew, it's a reflection of humanity.
Hmm.
And if you believe that humanity is flawed, if technology is bigger, badder humanity, then we also have the potential for bigger, badder evil. And I think you capture that really well in this Omni universe.
I appreciate that, man. I put a lot of hours and time and thought into it. And it's really the conglomeration of all these different films and shows and books that I've read over the years. I really haven't touched on even 1% of all the media that has gone into shaping, my thoughts on all the above.
Sure.
And the challenge is, right, nowadays, because there's so much of this type of content out there, how do you craft something that's a little bit unique? You know what I mean? Or even a lot bit unique because a lot of it has been said or explored. And every time there's a new innovation that sort of sweeps up the mass populace, there's more media that comes out that reflects upon it. So how can I create something when there's been so many great things that have already been created in the whole cyberpunk, futurism kind of realm? And my thought was, how can we take something that is a reflection of reality, forecasting it forward, and still has a spiritual element to it?
Right.
And Omni Part One is all built around this idea of the reemerged Tower of Babel, which is the album cover, manifested in the form of artificial intelligence. And it's all just sort of shadows and hints in the first book and in the Omni double album. You don't really ever get the full picture of where I'm going with it. And that was kind of intentional because I wanted to leave it open ended enough to see, okay, if people are really digging this, I'm going to do more,
Sure.
more music, more novels. And that's kind of where I stand right now in terms of on the precipice of putting that out to the world, saying, look, I know I announced that I'm not doing Project 86 anymore. And I stand by that in the sense that, this isn't another Project 86 album. Even
Right.
if I've left the P86 on the front of the word Omni, you know,
Sure.
it's basically to say, this is to get real nerdy. This is the best analogy that I have. And it's so dorky, but it's perfect. I was a huge Generation One Transformers fan as a kid,
Nice.
I loved the toys, I loved the show, and I watched the movie, and like everybody else, part of my soul died when they killed off Optimus Prime in the original film. Like I was like,
Yep.
why did they do that? Like, why would they do that? He's the whole
Yeah.
show,
They
you
killed
know?
almost everybody.
They killed everybody.
They killed the old toy line, right? I think was
Yeah,
the dark side of it.
and I've watched so many documentaries and read so many articles on why, and I get it. It still wasn't the right decision, and the fan outcry was so big they had to bring back Optimus Prime in the cartoon.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the next season. But when Megatron is about to die as well, like Prime beats him to hell, and he's floating through space, and then this big planet-eating monster thing shows up named Unicron and basically reanimates him and says, "Okay, I'm going to give you the power to come back to life, basically, but I'm going to give you a new body and a new name and new
Mhm.
troops to command and all that stuff." So Megatron is reborn as Galvatron, and it was kind of cool because the voice actor who did Megatron's voice, Frank Welker, was replaced by Leonard Nimoy.
Yeah.
Leonard Nimoy was Galvatron. So here's this new character, but he was still fully Megatron at the same time. But he had a new voice, a new skin, and new powers. And I'm like, that's what's going on here. It's just a different thing.
That's
You
really
know,
cool. No, that's really cool.
is it?
A really cool way to describe
I
it.
think it's dorky.
It is to us. I mean,
Yeah.
but whatever. The 2 people in this virtual room right now think it is the coolest thing ever, okay? No, that's actually a lot better because I was about to say, yeah, Project 86 was Dragon Ball and,
I
P86
never,
Omni is Dragon Ball Z, right?
I never watched either.
Different just slightly different generations. You can see their
Hmm.
Transformers versus
Yeah,
the Dragon Ball Z, but,
yeah. I'm a little older.
that's okay. That's okay. There's still time. I can send you a DVD set.
Okay, all
We
right.
can get you caught up. You'll never release an album again. You'll be busy watching these DVDs, But no, that is cool. And actually, I kind of wanted to get into that a little bit too. I know we've been getting really heavy sci-fi stuff. So when people are like, I thought this was first of all, I thought this was a music channel, and second of all, I thought this was an interview with a musician. So let's talk about music a little bit, and
I guess.
I'm actually gonna walk back a little bit into the band history. So I read
Sure.
your book. You and I talked about it for like 2 hours.
So awesome that you read
Um,
it and wanted to talk to me about it. You've
yeah, it
been
was
you've been so supportive and put so much time into my recent endeavors. It's been really cool. It's been
yeah,
really
it's
fun,
been
man. I got to take you out to dinner next time I'm in your area.
we do. We need to do something. We need to do something fun for sure. But in your book, you sort of hint at in a very polite way that your intention for Project 86 was to always kind of push the boundary of how heavy the band could be, right? To really just go hard because you had your self-titled record, which was obviously a hard rock,
Yeah.
borderlining on heavy metal. There was a strange time, in the late 90s
It
where
wasn't as heavy back then.
it wasn't as heavy, but it was still aggressive. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
It still had biting lyric. The lyric. I always joke the self-titled is heavier from a lyrical perspective in that it's more biting. It's a little sarcastic. It has all of the elements, kind of like what you were talking about with Megatron versus Galvatron. All of the elements that we liked about the band and about your personality and your lyrics. It's all there. You know what I mean in the original in the original release. And then obviously Drawing Black Lines comes out and it's exponentially heavier, aggressive, more aggressive, faster. And I remember during that period of time, me and my friends being like, so I mean, how heavy is our next one's going to be, right? It's going to be 3 times as heavy, 4 times as heavy, right? And then we sort of went in a different direction. And it always
Hmm.
seemed like, and this is my interpretation of the book, that there was always kind of this invisible wall, almost a firmament or whatever, that like you were never able to in the original incarnation of the band break through to that sort of more biting, more brutal part of
Right.
heaviness. So I just kind of wanted to get your thoughts on that as far as like, was it always your intention to kind of go harder and harder and harder and harder, or was it kind of like a let's explore different sort of sounds?
That's a good question. I have thought about this a lot over the years and tried to put myself back in the position of, well, how did I feel at this time or how did I feel at that time? And I always come back to why did the Beastie Boys make me feel the way they felt when I was in 6th grade or whatever? Because that was the first band I was ever truly a fan of.
Yeah.
It wasn't because they were larger than life, although that was part of it, or because, or because necessarily they, wrote pop songs, Fight for Your Right was a pop song.
Sure.
It was because when I first heard License to Ill and Rhymin' and Stealin', the first song drops in and it's got that sample of Led Zeppelin. And then the guitars come in and they're basically yelling when the music starts. It's not really a rap song as much as it's like a hardcore song almost. Like
Yeah.
they're yelling throughout the song a lot. I love the way that made me feel because it was extreme. There was something about it that was like, don't let your parents hear this.
Right.
You know what I mean? Or turn this up and you're going to annoy the neighbors, and then you get further into the album, you realize, oh, this is a rap album. This is actually a rap album because you didn't know it from Fight for Your Right. Like
Yeah.
I mean, it was yelling spoken elements to the song, but it's not really a rap song and it has guitar in it, you know?
Sure.
So you don't really know what the album was going to be.
Yeah.
And then you hear Rhymin' and Stealin', and it's also a yelling, guitar-driven, sampled beat thing, you know?
Yeah.
I'm like, "Dude, this is kinda heavy," you know? This makes me feel like anger and angst and all those good words, you
Like you're
know?
10 feet tall and you could, go outside and throw a car. Yeah.
Yeah, and then as you get further into the record, there are more songs that hit hard like that, and they're just, like, arrogant and cocky and
Yeah.
ridiculous and over the top. A lot of it was, made up by Rick Rubin, obviously. I don't know if you ever liked the Beastie Boys. There's a great self-produced documentary on Apple Music by the two remaining members, but they talk about how that era was like a fabrication. It was really just Rick Rubin kind of driving the ship, and they're just
Gotcha.
kind of playing roles, which is a bummer because that was my favorite era. But it was like testosterone fueled, right? And that's the same way I felt when I heard Slayer.
Yeah.
When I heard Slayer, I was like, this is the music that you can't play when your parents are around. You know what I mean? Or for little kids, or like you can't, it's like I had to look around me to see if anyone saw me holding the CD, or
Right.
the tape. It was the same thing with Metallica as well. So we're talking about the music that was the most extreme for the time. When I was a kid,
Yeah.
Public Enemy, Beastie Boys, before that, Run DMC, even that was considered. I mean, that was more pop, but it was still like if you listen to their records, it was harder.
Sure.
So anything that was pushing the edge of like, this is what's happening right now and is an extreme thing that, the old fuddy-duddies are not going to understand, that was the principle. And there's a punk rock ethos to that, or alternative, or whatever terminology you want to use. So fast forward, who were the bands that were making me feel that way when Project was started? Well, there was a few hardcore bands that I would go see regularly. Talk about this in detail in the book.
Yeah.
In SoCal, there was a great hardcore scene. I had some friends that got me into going to underground shows, and the heavier bands were the ones that I liked the most, and there were a bunch of them that I followed. And then there were more mainstream bands that were coming out around then that also made me feel those emotions, the Tools, the Rage Against the Machines, the Soundgardens and the others, it's just whatever was producing those emotions in me. So I feel like Self-Titled was the first attempt at that, and we made a good first effort there for 1998.
Sure.
Drawing Black Lines was more into that. Like I was really into the music of Drawing Black Lines when we were done with it. I really loved the product. I was shocked that we made something that was one, so good, and two, so in line with how I felt. Like this is the music I want to make because this is the music I would want to listen to. You know what I
Sure.
mean?
It's your feelings out in like
Yeah.
a buyable form. Yeah.
Yeah, like, I don't know if you've ever sat down, like, you're talking about making the skin on Canva,
Mhm.
like, I've done some graphic design off and on over the years, over the last decade or so, and I've never been able to fully educate myself on how to use all the tools available to actually make the pictures in my mind come to life usually.
Yeah.
I have a little bit, here and there. Like I did one of our album packages and I was really happy with how that came out. And there are some other things that I worked on along the way that I was really happy with. But in general, it's always been a struggle because I hate learning how to use computer programs.
Yeah.
So I never really reached the point where it's like somebody says, "Okay, I want a marshmallow floating on a lake of lava with a UFO piercing the marshmallow and the whole thing going up in flames." I want it to look like in a surrealistic sort of style, like Dolly or something, meets modern surrealism. You know what I mean? If somebody says that to me, I'm like, I don't know how to make that, you know.
Right.
But you just imagine if you had the power to make the picture in your mind come to life. The you rub your hands together. I love it when a plan comes together, like that
Mm.
feeling.
Yeah.
That's what happened with drawing black lines, but even better. And the thing that made it awesome to me is that we were on the leading edge of the thing. You know what I mean? It wasn't just new metal or hardcore or any of that stuff. It was our own thing. It
Yeah.
didn't really sound like any of the other stuff. I mean, there's a little bit of the more mainstream corn elements, like those bands that were popping back then. And there's a little bit of like the punk rock element, hardcore, punk and hardcore element, but not fully committed to that. A little bit of the spoken rappy vocal, but not fully committed. You know what I mean? We sort of found our own thing right there. And I found my own thing as like a vocalist on that record.
Yeah, I mean, what you're describing about, Beastie Boys and how it made you feel and all that. That's what drawing black lines was for me
Mm-hmm.
and my best friend Buddy. We listened to drawing black lines every day on the way to school. You know what I mean? It was just like he drove me because I didn't start driving until later. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, every day, yeah, that's what we listened to. And I remember when he showed me drawing black lines, and he's like, "Yeah, this band." He goes, "These guys are cool because they don't sound like any other bands."
That's
Because like
cool. I love hearing
we
that.
yeah, because we were really in that culture of, like, if you like Linkin Park, you need to go listen to PAX 217, or if you like you know
Right.
what I mean, or whatever, right?
That
Uh,
was the marketing.
we didn't have one, but there wasn't anything really like, they would lump in, if you like Korn. So, like, yeah,
Yeah.
to a certain degree, of course, if you're into stuff like Korn and Deftones, you're probably gonna like Project 86, right? Like, it's in the same neighborhood, right? But as far as, like, a lot of the cosmetic similarities that they would use between bands to market them, but that was
Yeah.
the coolest thing about Project at the time. And I think that's really Drawing Black Lines is one of the first records that got me used to the idea of a dude yelling at me. You know what I mean? For
Yeah.
a half hour or an hour.
And
You
that's
know
what
what
I
I mean?
always wanted to do, man. I always wanted to yell at people.
Yeah.
I didn't want to sing to people. I wanted to
Yeah.
yell at people. I wanted to make them feel unsettled or, like, whoa, I don't know how to deal with this. I don't know how to
Yeah.
reconcile with this. You know what I mean? And maybe within that, I could put some messages in there that are thoughtful and then leave you with an impression so you go home and kind of think about it a little bit. You know what I
Right.
mean? Whatever that
You're
is.
assaulting people with introspection, right? Uh,
Hopefully. I mean,
yeah.
that's the goal because that's what I liked. I want to be kind of almost scared of the guy who's up there on the stage, like the bands that I really
Yeah.
liked. I was like, dude, I'm not sure about that guy. I'm not sure if that guy's human, you
Yeah.
know? That's how I want to make people feel. That's what I wanted to embody.
Sure.
So it's just an extension of being a music fan, just like writing books is an extension of being a reader. You know what I
Mhm.
mean?
Sure.
Or an absorber of other content. So it's the same phenomenon. Where it gets kind of weird is like the band started getting some success, and then we end up being on a major. And I don't think any of us were ready for all that came along with that world. The price that you have to pay in order to play in that world. You
Sure.
know,
What's the price for the exposure? What's the price for the
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and some of our contemporaries were very willing to play the game, so to speak. I knew very early on that I was not. It just wasn't for me. I just don't do it naturally, you know. There's so much schmooze and networking, and you gotta just do the thing. You
Yep.
gotta schmooze every person, and I always kind of resented the fact that I have to do that in order to get people to appreciate the art, the music.
Yeah.
And that's not like you have to understand. I created this impression in a lot of people's minds over the years of like arrogance or pride or hubris or whatever. Some of that was just me feeling frustrated at the fact that there are all of these things that come along with doing this as a career or trying to do this as a career that I just wasn't prepared for. I didn't know how to handle.
Yeah.
I didn't know how to handle I never in a million years thought that the band was going to be successful in any way. I didn't even picture it. I just wanted to play good shows. I wanted enough people to be in the room so we could have a mosh pit, and that I could jump in the crowd and not fall on my face. You
Right.
know, if I could do that, and we had a recording of music that I felt good about, man, we won. You know,
Sure.
and so you turn around and 1,000 people are coming to shows, and you're doing some big stuff. I didn't know how to handle any of that. Like, I came from a really small town. I was an only child. There's a huge part of me that still to this day doesn't feel like I deserve that type of attention. You know, I
Sure.
certainly don't think that I'm like the most talented vocalist in the world, or a lot of what people imagine I am like is the opposite of what I am really like.
I
Y-
have come to find that
Yeah.
find that out over the past couple of years. Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
and after a while, I think I realized people really like have this perception of me that's so distorted,
Yeah.
because I was so successful in sort of creating this almost like fictitious thing. You know
The
what I mean?
aloof, dark secret
Yeah,
holder, the there has to be a mystery about what I say. Everything I say has
yeah,
to have a double meaning because you have to keep people engaged.
totally.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna liken this to something that maybe no one wants to hear me talk about, but it's exactly the same. Women. So
All
when
right.
I was young, I was always the friend. I always got friend zoned. And it was just heartbreaking watching all my friends get all the girls. And all those same girls really liked me as a friend,
Right.
in early high school and such. And I would deconstruct it. I would think about like, why, like, what does that guy have on me? You know what I mean? Why did they react to him, but they react to me totally differently? And I didn't understand it until I got a little older and I realized, oh, they girls, they need you to push certain buttons in them emotionally and psychologically in order for them to view you as not just a friend. And I was not ever this extraordinary person growing up. When I sat in a room of friends, I was never the one that got singled out. I wasn't like the nerdiest, dorkiest kid in the room, but I wasn't the coolest one either. I
Sure.
wasn't the best looking. I wasn't the ugliest. I could play sports. I was decent at them, but I wasn't a great athlete. I was super smart though. And, I don't say that to be arrogant, but I was always really good at school and always a good writer and always good at math and always went to the I was in the gifted and talented program as a kid, but I say all this because I was always ashamed of it. I always felt like I was a nerd. You know
Right.
what I mean?
At a time
So,
when being a nerd was not celebrated.
yeah,
Right.
it was not celebrated at all.
Yeah.
So, like, I always felt, like who I was not good enough for most people. The only people that really related to me were I call it the people who have the shining. It's the people who can see me, you know what I mean? Because I'm really a ghost type of thing,
Uh-huh.
So I realized the thing about females around the same time I realized the thing about playing music is that you have to push certain buttons in people to get them to pay attention, to respond in a certain way. Well, if I'm just nice guy Schwab to everybody, nobody's going to care about that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But if I'm the guy that like from the movie Swingers, that you're not too sure about,
Yeah.
then people pay attention. They're intrigued. And I think after a certain point, I just like leaned into that so much, that like people began to think that that's who I actually am. And
Sure.
that's actually not who I am. I'm actually a really sweet, like soft dude, you know what I mean? Who just has a prickly exterior that I've sort of constructed over the years because I mean, that's what people tell you that keeps their attention, you know?
Yeah. Did you ever read that Goosebumps? I don't know if you ever read Goosebumps
I
or not.
never read it. So
I'm really
only people
showing
I
off
knew
my
did. Yeah.
'90s kid, like, you
Yeah.
can really tell I grew up in the '90s.
Hmm.
Um, but there was this Goosebumps book, about
Goops
girl.
bumps.
It was called The Haunted Mask.
Mhm,
And it was about a girl that put on this like this Halloween mask. There's this ugly monster face, and she wore it all night, and she had like all this like sort of self confidence. She was having a great time or whatever with the mask on, and then of course because it's a children's horror book, the mask became her face, and she
mhm.
started becoming the creature that was in the mask. And I think anytime you get the slightest brush with fame, because you got to look at like who we had to look up to as role models at the time, because you look on the TV at the time, and you're like, okay, well, how does this dude from Metallica, he comes across like he doesn't care about anything, right?
Hmm.
And he's super popular, so that's how I'm supposed to act, right? Like,
Right.
um, I've gone through my own arc of sort of playing a character online and trying to convince people that I was something that I wasn't.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's kind of all of this is a little off subject, but it's actually totally related.
Yeah,
Because we're walking through kind of where the band has been, where I've been, and what's kind of led me to this place,
yeah,
And getting back to your original question about just making extreme music, when we were making our third record, Truthless Heroes, what few people understand is that there was such pressure, not necessarily directly coming from the corporate forces, but indirectly in the sense that we were in a weird spot because we needed to get into a new record contract and bought out of our first one because we had signed this pretty lengthy deal with our first record label, and we wanted the major label to buy us out of it, and it wasn't just so we could get rich. It was so that we had a chance to make a living at all and compete with the other bands who were on the major label.
right. You want to split whatever money you could make between two labels, and then the money runs out, and it becomes
Yeah,
a
yeah.
mess. Yeah,
So our attorney was basically like, you guys need to quit or we need to get you a new record deal.
sure,
So Atlantic was basically saying to us, look, if you give us the record that we want, we'll spend the money to get you out of your deal,
right,
but it has to be commercially viable. Well, we didn't have enough wisdom, knowledge, experience, and gall to say, okay, we're going to write the record that we want, but give you 2 songs or 3 songs that you can market.
right.
It turned into, how do we write hits?
Hmm.
And that was when there was just a disconnect between me and everything else surrounding my music career, that it took me so long. Took me, I would venture to say, it took me until OMNI to find myself again. Since then,
Sure.
I kind of got lost inside of that whole world, that whole process, and really, put out a lot of records along the way. And
Yeah.
there were high moments, there were good moments, but comparing that to the way that I felt making this most recent material is very different, you know? And it took me kind of really sitting down and thinking about, well, what is it that I want to do? If I can remove all of the exterior forces and just do what I love and what I want to do, what is it? Well, I
Yeah.
want to shed this whole persona, this whole perception surrounding me and Project 86, the whole sound of it that was sort of a little bit corrupted and never really came back again
Right. Never
from
went back on track to the
Fro
original,
and
like,
I'm not
yeah,
blaming anyone else. I mean, that's me. I was corrupted. I sorta got off track and, this just the hard rock thing was never a part of the equation, yet that became what the band was for however many records.
yeah,
And, I really had to just strip it all away and go, "Well, what do I wanna do?" If I can really get rid of all the expectations surrounding all the stuff that has been built up over the years and just go towards that, what does it look like? It looks like Omni, you know what I mean? It's more about the art and the story, it's kinda nerdy and it's world building and there's a writing element because I love writing and I love words and I love telling stories, and it's more extreme because that's what makes me feel.
yeah.
So, what makes me feel when I listen to music right now is, are bands that are like the humanity's last breaths of the world. Like I
Mhm.
put on their stuff, and it doesn't sound weird to me. It sounds like this music is home to me.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I listen to that heavy of stuff. And it's kind of ironic. I saw somebody post somewhere a while back. Well, he's only doing heavy music because it's trendy right now.
I think I saw that post.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I was like, "Oh, if you only knew."
Yeah.
Like,
Well,
that's
that was
not the
one of my
case.
questions too, is like, is the more brutal metal, is that something that you more recently got into, or was it kind of more of a, because for some people, for the old school Project fans, it was a massive change. For guys like me, I remember being like, "Oh my gosh, finally." You know what I mean? Let's
Yeah,
really,
and that's how
you
I
know,
felt, like, "Finally,
yeah.
I got to do this," and I started screaming, you know what I mean? Like, the way that it feels like my voice should be used,
Yeah.
the way it should. I mean, really, since Truthless Heroes, every album I have felt like, man, almost, like, jealous of my peers who get to play more extreme and heavier music? So there's always this, like, I mean, you just pick a band, dude. I remember sitting side stage when Under Oath was playing Cornerstone main stage for the first time when they were blowing
Uh-huh.
up on Never Changing Safety. And I never really listened to a ton of Under Oath, you know?
Yeah.
But I'm standing there, and I think it was As I Lay Dying played before them, and I'm
Mhm.
standing next to Tim Lambesis, and I watched them play, and then I watched Under Oath play, and just felt jealous. Not of that they had sort of taken my spot of popularity in that world, you know, at that moment, because that was like 2 years, 3 years after 2 years after I think we headlined the main stage of Cornerstone,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
But it really felt like a changing of the guard a little bit at that moment. Like, okay, this is the new, because Drawing Black Lines was kind of like this is the heaviest,
Yeah, oh, yeah.
thing right
I
now,
mean, I used to say that to people, like, unironically, like, yeah.
But then, like, watching Norma Jean, watching As They Lay Dying, watching Under Oath, and feeling like, man, I want to play stuff that's this
Yeah.
gnarly. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Because this makes me feel like it's just a little bit more like I don't know how else to put it, on the precipice, on
There's
the
no
edge.
limit to your
You know?
expression. You know what I mean? You don't have to be limited by the finesse that is often required from digestible music,
Yeah.
is really
So
what it is. Yeah.
I've always had an affinity for heavy music if it's good. But
Sure.
just like I've always been as a music fan, there's only a handful of bands that I really love. The
Mhm.
rest of it just sort of sounds like a copy of a copy to me,
Yeah,
you
that's most
know?
music I've come to find. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think they say, like, the music critics curse, it's like 98% of the stuff that you listen to is derivative drivel, but, like,
Yeah.
that 2% is the bands that are, like, really innovating and, like, really pushing forward, you
Yeah.
know? Plus the amount of experimentation that's required sometimes to get there. It's
Mhm.
kinda I just did this video about black metal, and I was thinking about that while I was typing up the script for it, and, black metal is a very uncomfortable style of music. It's not palatable to most people.
Right.
But there are some black metal bands that have figured out how to dial it in such a way that, like, it does make me feel things. It was able to ascend from the awkwardness, you know, of the style. And so, like, there's a little bit of accommodation for that as well.
Mhm.
A lot of the time it takes a genre a couple of years to, like, really bake into to develop into something really, really cool.
Mhm.
But then you run into imitators. Once it becomes cool, then everybody wants to sort of jump on the train. um so it is interesting too that somebody would comment that, oh, he's just doing this because because it's trendy. And it's like,
I didn't even think about it that way. Like,
yeah,
I didn't even realize, like, heavy music is, like, a thing again until I was already down the road of doing the Omni thing, part 1. And
dude,
and I started seeing a couple comments like that, and I was like, "Really? Is it trendy?" I was like, "Yeah, I guess."
I
Like,
mean, go look at a Lorna Shore video on YouTube and see how many views are on it.
yeah,
It
that's
sort of blew
true.
my mind, that song, their most popular one, the To the Hellfire. I could not believe that a band that sounded like that was so popular. You know
Yeah,
what I mean? Because I mean, it's incredible. The music, the musicianship's incredible.
yeah,
The vocals are uncomfortable,
yeah.
you know, uh, and it's awesome. But yeah, like, to see people actually giving it the proper due. You know what I mean? The
Mhm.
time of day, and being like, oh yeah, this is actually notable because of the vocal gymnastics that are being
Totally.
done. So I think it's the perfect time. And I think something that I think a lot of the fans, I kind of read through some of the comments on your social media posts and stuff, because I like
Mhm.
to I like to get a vibe,
Sure.
of where people are at. And I think one of the questions that people may have is, whenever you had decided, whenever before Omni was actually fleshed out, and you'd kind of launched the final campaign, right?
Mhm.
The end of Project 86, and at the time it was just the end. At what point during the Omni creative process did you realize that, like, oh, this is not the end for me? Like, in a spiritual sense, of course, it's the end of Project 86, the rock band, as we, you know what I mean, as we know them.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I meant all along. Like, there were two reasons why I suppose I should touch on this, but before I do, I have to correct myself. Something I said off camera before we were
Sure.
talking. We were talking about black metal, and I inserted the word death, and you didn't correct me. Like, I made a mistake in comparing. Like, I said black metal was death metal
Oh yeah.
because I said, because we were talking about the epicenter of black metal, and I always think of it as being Norway. You
Yeah,
know?
yeah. The origin, Norway, yeah.
Yeah.
And
Uh,
actually, to answer your question, for death metal, definitely Florida.
Death metal, totally different.
Yep.
Yes. But I meant black metal. I was
Yeah,
like, "Is it Norway? Is that where we go?" Like, because whenever I'm there, I feel like the whole culture is black metal. You know what I mean?
sure.
But is that still, or has that always, that's like origins, but is that still sort of the hub for black metal? Or if you're looking for black metal, great black metal, where else do you go? I'm not really into that kind of music, but I was just curious.
Yeah, no, I mean it's worldwide for sure.
Yeah.
It's funny. I wish that when I had made that video that I had put the country of origin of each band with each
There's
of the
so
song
much
clips that I put.
lore surrounding black metal in Norway.
Oh yeah,
And if you spend any time there with guys who have an affinity for that kind of music, you learn all of this stuff,
sure.
and all of this history of like burning of churches and all of these incidents and all these different things. And now it's like written into their culture.
Yep.
It's kind of interesting. That's a totally
We
sidebar,
should do a different
total
conversation.
sidebar.
Yeah, not
Yeah.
another sided conversation about black metal. That would be fun.
It's not my world, but I know a little, you know. So you asked me like about ending things and then going into Omni Part 3,
Yeah.
basically. And what am I
Yeah, like
thinking?
when you knew that like, oh, there's gonna be a part three, you know?
So yeah, and I have to sort of recap why did I make this decision? Well, it wasn't necessarily that exciting to me to make another Project 86 album, you know.
Yeah.
And when I sat in those feelings, like, it's just kind of being like, well, I think the fans are going to feel the same way I do about it. Like, it's just, if I announce another record, they're just going to be like, okay, cool, whatever. Drawing black lines. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
we'll buy it or whatever. It's pretty
maybe,
cool. Yeah. There's some
or
songs that sound almost as good as some of the ones on previous albums, right?
yeah. And so
Sure.
that's not a good place to be. That's no fun for anybody. It's not fun
Yeah.
for me. It's not fun for anyone else. And you start just feeling like a caricature of yourself, like your younger self. So I'm just like, I don't want to do that. What can I do to like make people excited? Or what is the appropriate move right now? Should I do anything else at all with this? And I'm like, I think if I say that it's the last thing, it will put pressure on me to do something special. And it will also reinvigorate people, to support and to pay attention at least. So,
Sure.
but it was definitely like, I don't even know if I can do one more when I announced it. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? I
Yeah.
remember sending a text message to Corey Brandon from Norma Jean. And I basically said, I have no idea what I'm doing. I don't know what this is going to be. Do you want to sing on a song?
Right.
And he said, we should write a song together. And I said, okay, let's do it.
Sweet. Yeah.
So we hopped on a call and we tried to write a song together. It went okay. Nothing special came out of it. And he's like, "Why don't we do this? Why don't I hook you up with a couple of my dudes, my brother, who I've been friends with for years, Matt, and one of my guys, and they can help us." And I met with those dudes, and then it turned into Corey suggesting, well, why don't we help you execute your vision? You
Yeah.
know, I
Get a
said,
think tank going. Yeah.
I said, "Yeah, that'd be cool. I'm really into it. You guys are awesome. I just don't want people to be like Norma 86 or whatever." You know what I mean? So can we be
Yep.
very intentional about approaching it that way? And it was like, "Yeah, we're going to help you execute your vision." So that was cool, and it was very invigorating for me to work with such talented people. And not to take anything away from any of the other people that I've worked with, but like they really got it. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? I remember being at Corey's spot in Arkansas in their practice studio. I got out a whiteboard and sort of diagrammed out everything I want to do with the record before
Mhm.
we'd done anything with it. And I'm kind of going, they're gonna think this is so lame. And those guys were like, "That's cool. We can do this. It's gonna be awesome." And I'm like, "All right, it's on.
Sweet.
Let's
Yeah.
go.
Let's go. Yeah.
Let's go." You know what I mean? And from there, it just the whole process was so much fun. It was
Yeah.
so much fun. And it was fun because one, there was a lot of talent in the room, and I always made the joke that I was the least talented person in the room whenever I was working with all these guys. And two, I felt alive inside of it for the first time, probably since drawing Black Lions. I was really genuinely excited to make music again. And it felt awesome. And it felt like I was in the game again, making heavy music. I remember saying to Grayson, guitar player, I was like, look, I know our stuff is not that heavy compared to now standards, but I would like to take this in a much heavier direction so we could at least be in the conversation a little bit,
Yeah.
like in the game. Maybe riding the bench, but in the game at least. Like on the
Sure.
team, on the team, let's put it that way. And I remember hearing some of those first demos and I was just like, yeah, dude, we're on the team. We're on the team. I've been wanting to sing over stuff like this my whole life. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
And the first time I was able to do it was on DBL. There's been a few songs since then, but not really. It's always just been a hard rock thing, and I'm not decrying all the music that was made along the way. I really wanted to scratch the melodic itch. I really wanted to prove to the world that we could write more commercial sounding songs and choruses and things like that. And I think that's residual from Truthless Heroes.
Yeah. I mean,
There, you
that's
got them all, dude.
yeah,
I mean,
I got
there's some
most of
high
them.
points on every record for sure,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and this one. But this one
But
I was listening to
it
earlier.
just that's a good one.
Yeah.
I just felt more of a kinship with this idea. Like if I can take kind of the cyberpunk world and meld it with heavier music and put some little bits of electronic stuff in there and more aggressive vocal
Yeah.
and tell a story. And then all of a sudden I'm feeling alive inside of it. So the intent for me was never to go, I'm retiring and never making music again.
Right.
I don't think I ever said that. It was just Project 86 has so much baggage for me on so many different levels. And it does for other people too.
Yeah.
You know, like there's so much negativity surrounding, me keeping my own band going after, original members left, one at a time. And I think there's a narrative out there that I somehow like chased them away. Didn't go that way at all. You know what I mean? We
Yeah.
didn't see eye to eye primarily on the musical direction, I think, after a while.
Sure.
And that was where all of the tension came from,
Right.
primarily. I've heard guys say in interviews and stuff, "Oh, Schwab was really difficult to write songs with." And dude, if I had to do over again, just being stripped of a lot of the things that I needed to strip myself of now, I would be a completely different guy inside of
Sure.
it all back then. I wouldn't be nearly as difficult. I would still though be passionate about fighting for a vision. And that's what I learned on Omni. It's like, oh, I stopped fighting for my vision, starting with Truthless Heroes.
Yeah.
And I got so used to that I didn't even realize I was doing that. That
Hmm.
whoever I was playing with or working with, it was just like, well, it's not going to sound like what I want, so it just needs to be a compromise. And then I just got to focus on writing lyrics.
Yeah. Do your job. Stay in your lane.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, wait a second. First album, second album, that was me starting my band. And dudes coming alongside the vision that I had already communicated and thought out and everything.
Yeah.
I need to get back to being the leader of the thing. So again, I'm just jumping around here trying to paint the mental picture of it all.
Yeah.
Very unexpected for me to enjoy the process. Very unexpected for me to like feel so at home making music again. Very unexpected for me to be able to do all these things that I've always wanted to do but never did for whatever reason. My fault, right?
Yeah.
And then, before we were finished with part 1, I was like, if it could feel like this, I want to do this forever. And I'm already going down that road going, people are going to get mad at me for changing my mind. You know what I mean? You know,
Yeah.
not that I'm changing my mind because it is a new thought. It is a new thing. It's the Megatron to Galvatron thing. But I made a big deal about like no more Project 86, right?
Yeah.
I'm not going back on it because what I want to be gone is the expectation, the
Sure.
baggage, the box, the perception, the Schwab is a dick thing. You know what I
Sure.
mean?
Yeah.
And let's just make stuff that I like, that I'm passionate about, that's more aggressive, that's darker, that's more narrative based. You know what I mean? It still is going to have the spiritual, the Christian element. You know what I mean?
Sure.
But it's it's woven in, it's indirect, a lot of it. Now when I explain it to you, it makes a lot of sense. But I've had a lot of people go, "Is this still Christian?"
Yeah, it's still there. I remember I sat down and I did a review for Omni Part 1 back. I think I released the review. I remember I was like, I have to get this review out before the album drops.
All
Right.
right,
That
yeah, it
was
was great
I was
review.
like,
I loved it.
oh, let me get, yeah. That was actually my most popular episode of when DFT's Dungeon was just an audio podcast.
Mm-hmm.
That was the most, because I was the only, there was like 3 days where I was the only review of Omni Part 1 on the internet, right?
Mm-hmm.
I remember very quickly picking up the whole like, oh, there's a supernatural element
Mm-hmm.
to this. It jumped right out at me, and I thought it was really cool, and I thought it was really well
Thanks, man.
done. And I also liked how the album, the part 1 specifically, told a very specific story. And I'm getting into this because it's going to lead into my next question.
Mm-hmm.
So, part 1 obviously tells a story from beginning to end. The world is essentially being run by this mega corporation of Omni. They've got a giant headquarters. They've built this amazing tower
Yeah.
to the sky. And then, as you sort of go, it goes into a lot of elements. What I liked about part one is that it tells a complete story of how it explains the fall, of Omni at the end of
Mm-hmm.
it. Spoiler, the record's been out for a few years. I mean, come on. I'm not worried about spoilers at this.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah,
Read the book. Read the book.
yeah,
Read the novel.
spoiler alert. Yeah, things do not end well with this setup. But what I liked about part 1 is that even though it tells a complete narrative, it's kind of like reading The Hobbit, right?
Hmm.
You read The Hobbit for the first time, you have no context for anything that's going on, but they reference all this other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Showing that there is more lore and more nuance to the world, to the story. And then it's followed up perfectly by Omni Part 2, which, sort of goes into the origin. Basically, you end Omni Part 2 at the beginning of Omni Part 1, which was kind of cool. So, when going into Omni Part 3, are we continuing a story, or are we doing more of a world flesh out, or are we doing something totally different within the universe?
I got to be careful because I don't want to spoil it.
Sure.
So let me get into everything that you just mentioned a little bit more. And I'm just thinking as you're talking, how can I explain this to get people excited about it?
Yep. Well,
Because
and then that's what I'm gonna clip, and I'm gonna make it into the
yeah,
Instagram reel.
yeah, yeah.
No
So
pressure, just deliver perfectly the first
yeah,
time.
yeah.
Yeah,
So Omni was always meant to be a snapshot of the moment right before singularity. But it's also meant to be a snapshot of the moment before, in the biblical sense, bad things start really happening in the world, right? So not to get too like, apocalyptic or revelation or biblical, you know what I mean? It's definitely fiction. It is not meant to be like a left behind type thing. You know what I mean? It is definitely like I take a few bits and pieces from biblical stories and I transpose a what if scenario on it. And this is the part that hopefully makes it a little bit unique in the context of the other cyberpunk or sci fi or futurism or dystopian content that's out there. So, the Tower of Babel, what was it? To me, it was a really spooky story because it's the first time mankind used technology. And what did they do? Well, they attempted to make God come down from heaven on their terms, basically to replace him. That
mhm,
was what the whole thing was about. Now, they didn't have the ability to do it. And in the original story, everybody gets scattered
right,
and the languages are confused because they did the opposite of spread out over the earth and multiply. They came together, they shared knowledge, they shared information. They're like, okay, you know how to build a brick, well, you know how to make mortar, you know how to do this. Okay, let's put everything together, and that way we don't have to be under this curse of God anymore where we
right,
die and we can't live forever. Well, that is what technology is in a nutshell. Like, you look at the iPhone or the personal computer or any of the innovations that are happening in medicine right now, and as I'm sure we'll see more 3D printed livers and hearts, and the further we go down that road of transhumanism, the more we start to see this principle come to fruition, that mankind's ultimate expression is his innovation. And
right.
what is it? Well, it's our spirit collectively expressing that we don't want to die, that we want to live forever.
Can we circumvent? Yeah,
Yeah, and we resent the fact that we live under a curse of mortality. Well, what if we had the ability to avert that, to get around it, to cheat it? You know what I mean? And that's the moment in time I wanted to take a snapshot of for Omni Part 1. And so the first song, Apotheosis, is meant to be approaching Omni City like you're driving to Vegas for the very first time and you're driving at night and you see that beam from Luxor, around the last curve, and then you see the lights in the whole city, and it's just this majestic, grand picture. You know what I mean? But what it represents in the Omni universe is we finally reach the moment in time where we can kill God. And that thought is not, or that idea, or that ability is not that far away for us
right,
as a species now. We've reached that point almost. We don't have the, hovercraft cars or the implants in our bodies quite yet, but soon the smartphone's going to be in our bodies, and I put that in the universe.
right.
And what builds it all? Well, it's the sharing of data. It's the same thing as Tower of Babel, sharing of information. Sharing of data is what builds the technocracy. But how do they acquire that data? That's the interesting part. So that's what I'm going into in Omni Part 2. So Omni Part 1 is basically there's a lead character who's a social media influencer, and it follows him from his childhood up through his ascent through the corporate ranks to where he
Mhm.
becomes basically the lead influencer for the technocracy, for the Omni Corporation. And in the process, he basically loses himself along the way in very interesting and progressive ways. And there's some pretty frightening moments with what's behind all of this technology and what's behind all of the artificial intelligence and these sentient companions and the quote executors of the Omni vision, all of these different bots and such, that have these personalities behind it. Well, I go into that as well, that there's a spiritual component. And it gets pretty, I don't know, Einstein, I guess, because the whole space-time continuum, there being different dimensions and the whole idea that we would become immortal delves into becoming divine and existing outside of the realms and the confines of time itself. So that's why you see on the album cover this huge tower, the reemerged Tower of Babel, which is in the story. It's called the Omni Tower, actually pierces the sky. Well, what does that mean?
Yeah.
It's causing a rip in space-time between dimensions, between the immortal and the mortal, so that mankind can cross over. And so we get into the whole metaverse and uploading consciousness and the ultimate goal of transhumanism inside of that, and the lead character, David, getting lost inside of all of that as he's trying to become the most successful influencer, on the planet. It leaves off with the tower in the city being destroyed by a quote meteor shower. That
Yeah.
was a direct result of the anomaly that was created by the tower through the basically launching. The tower has a hidden sort of purpose, and it's actually like a huge processing server that's meant to harness enough energy to create this hole in space time. And when it did that, it created a weather anomaly, which is what the mainstream narrative called it, that fell on the tower in the city. Well, I don't go into it that much in the novel, but that's the PR aftermath
Right.
that because the technocracy lives on. It's just a city that got destroyed.
Right.
So we pick up in part 3 after things go awry and our lead character ends up in the metaverse, uploaded, his consciousness, but still
Yeah.
very much alive. And we've got him and another character that I introduced in Omni part 1 who are going to tell, parallel stories, one of present time, one of looking back in time, sort of like a Godfather part 2 concept where it's like half the stories present day, half the stories in the past.
Okay.
And you're going to get a lot more insight into what built the technocracy. And I'll give you a hint. I tie in the word lust to it all.
Okay.
And this is my hint and what it's based upon. It's estimated that 15% of females under a certain age, Gen Z females, are now OnlyFans creators. So there is a huge transference of data and information occurring because of that phenomenon. When you take that alongside of the Instagram phenomenon, the YouTube phenomenon, and how much of our world and the monetization of our world is being driven by those types of transactions, there's something there. Now you combine that with the rise of artificially intelligent companions, and there's a convergence of sorts in history that I think we're headed for in the real world that I think is fundamental to what happened with building this fictitious one. So I'm going to get into all that. Customizable reality as it relates to human connection, multiplication, lust, sex, all that stuff. Right. So I have the whole story written out already. It's already storyboarded. I have half my lyrics done for Omni Part 3 already.
Okay.
I'm already down this road. I already know how it all ends up. I already know what's going to happen. And I think people will find this story to be even more compelling than the previous one because it's going to explain a lot of what happened in the first part and the second part. Yeah, the second part was meant to be 2 EPs that just delve into the backstory of the 2 main antagonists. The
Right.
founder of the Omni Corporation and the face of the Omni Corporation, which I treat like, a beast and a false prophet type thing, behemoth,
Yeah.
Leviathan. It goes into their thought processes and their motivations. In this new story, it's going to connect a lot more with people, I think. It's going to be less ethereal and more just like, okay, there's going to be a lot of light bulbs going on. That's why he was talking about this. That's why he was talking about that. That's where he's going with this. And the narrative is going to be really moving in a direction of crescendo as well.
Okay.
So I'm really excited about it. It's definitely a continuing story, and that's what I want to do moving forward. It's like this is something that's going to be episodic but continuing,
Gotcha.
just like a show.
That's awesome. That's cool. Cause yeah, I definitely, when I was really thinking about, Omni Part 1, Omni Part 2, the fact that we had kinda gone back to the foundation, I was like, "Are we fleshing out a world or are we continuing?" I'm happy to hear that we are continuing a story.
Yeah.
That's
It will
gonna be
flesh
cool.
out the world more as well, though,
Sure.
because it will explain all of the decisions that I made about the world building in part 1, which nobody knows about unless you actually read this novel.
Right.
I'm out of print currently of the hardback, but we're going to print more here shortly, but we put that back up on the web store for order. We're reserving copies right now. I won't call it a pre-order because it's not a long lead pre-order. It's just, gotta wait a few weeks for me to get them
Gotta wait
printed.
for them to
Basically.
print some new ones. Yeah.
Yeah, just print some
Gotcha.
new ones. That's just on back order right now.
Gotcha.
So we're gonna get more of those, or if you want it now, you can grab I have a PDF that you can order from the store. I'm getting this made into an ebook shortly, and I'll do an audiobook version of it as well during this album cycle. This will probably come out sooner rather than later. So I think the more people understand what's going on, and I purposely made it kind of user friendly. It's not like an 800-page nerd fest.
Right.
It's a short story. It's 200 pages, and you can
Yeah.
read it in a weekend, and it's very decipherable. But there is a lot of spiritual, metaphysical, and philosophical discussion inside of it that is more implied. But it is definitely a story. It's a story. I meant it to be a page turner, not
Not a manifesto. Yeah.
not a nerd manifesto. You
Well,
know?
why not? You got hardcore nerds in the fan base that want
Yeah,
them.
dude.
So you gotta subscribe on what is it, like the $4,000 level or more, in order to just send a message in Patreon, tell him Dan sent you, he'll know what to do.
Yeah, dude.
So speaking of continuing stories, something that sort of has been continuous in the history of the band for the last several releases is the crowdfunding aspect. And like I said, I've
Right.
been trolling your comments, and something that I hear people ask a lot is, well, the band's popular enough. Why do they need to crowdfund the album? And so I was wondering if you could get into what the benefit of a crowdfunded release would be over trying to go the traditional route with, either getting a label or trying to do a self-release on your own.
Yeah, the crowdfunded angle uh, seemed to work pretty well for us back when that was popping, right?
Yeah.
10 years ago or whatever, more now. And each successive crowdfund that we did, the fans seemed to really get into it. They really loved the extra stuff, the experiences, and they were willing to invest in, what I was doing and what we were doing along the way in increasing measure. One of the things that I discovered early on in my music career is if, you want to be able to make a living somehow doing music, you're going to have to multitask. You're gonna
Right.
have to take on a lot of responsibilities unless you are so big that it doesn't matter. But most bands aren't. And when I say so big, I mean you have to be gigantic. My experience early on is even when the band was doing quite well from a popularity standpoint, is that the everybody else gets paid, but you don't
Uh-huh.
and it's a distasteful subject, money. Nobody ever wants to hear their favorite artists talk about money. My argument is, though, this is as legit of a career as anything else, and I don't do this for money, but I have to make enough to live just in
Right.
order for me to be able to do the art. I'm going to put the same amount of time into it either way, whether or not I have a management team and a road, all of not road crew, but management team, label, and all these other people that fulfill these duties that get paid first.
Right.
So the crowdfund to us is a fun way to get fans passionate and excited about the process and to include them inside of it. And with the advent of our Patreon community on this last cycle, it's much more that way than ever before. Our Patreon community is, and you can attest to this, Daniel, we've gone from behind the scenes storytelling and history to collaboration. And it really is the structure of our Patreon community to be collaborative. I present everything as a work in progress to anyone that would want to speak into it, and I take everybody's input seriously. And what ends up happening is what I'm releasing is a conglomeration of ideas.
Yeah.
And my ideas are made better by the community, giving feedback, having conversations, coming on as guests,
Yeah.
and It's a circular transaction of information and creation, which I don't think there are too many bands out there doing. And I didn't do that on purpose. That's just what it became.
Yeah.
So that ethos is what drives the idea of the crowdfund. And now it's not just crowdfund; it's long lead pre-order and it's Patreon. It's a
Right.
couple different heads. And we've also started working with a new platform to approach live shows. There's a platform that approached me recently. They're called Funnel, Funl, and they have a way of structuring live shows that give the fans a little bit more say over how it all plays out. Basically, we set up minimums, on budgets and such, and then we're going. Right now we have to hit like a pre-sale minimum, and it's not a very large number
Right.
to play 3 album release shows, right?
Okay.
And once we hit, hopefully we will hit those pre-sale minimums, and it's a year out, so I don't see any reason why we wouldn't.
Sure.
Then we're going to launch some very specific VIP items associated with those shows that people can bid on, and people bid on those, and that's how we'll be able to, reach our budgets to be able to, travel to the show and take care of all the things that we need to take care of to be able to put on a great show.
Right.
So again, this is all engaging the fans though directly, which is totally different than what a lot of bands do, and I think it hurts me and us in terms of the perception a lot. Like what you just stated is like it gives the impression that the band is small, right?
Right.
And I find that a little bit ironic because there were a ton of large artists doing this approach, and I think the crash of Pledge Music really signified the shift away from this model, and the fact that so many fans, I think, got burned along the way where they invested in something. And really, I think it extends. I was talking to a buddy of mine about this the other day. I think it extends beyond music, the sort of depopularization of the crowdfund.
Yeah.
Once you saw everybody launching a GoFundMe to pay for their next automobile purchase, or all of these startup companies
Yeah.
taking
Yeah.
people's money and then folding,
Yep.
I think the model itself became a little bit burdensome for people. They or people just got burned out on the model. But this is the fifth time we've done this, and each one has been increasingly successful. The last one did very well.
Yeah.
Obviously tied into the final chapter sentiments. I've found a niche here that's pretty unique inside of hopefully making unique music and telling a unique story and cultivating a unique group of people who function more as investors rather than fans. They're
Yeah.
and I don't mean investor like, what do we get out of this? We're putting in money for a return. You know what I mean? There is a return, but it's investing time, energy, effort to really be a part of something. And there are a lot of artists that will say that to their fan base, but don't really mean it.
Right.
And I actually do mean it, and that I do because you're there and you listen
Yeah.
to a
I've been
lot of the
part of
content.
two.
You
Yeah. I've
know,
been part of two of the campaigns. So I was on the Sheep Among Wolves one and the OMNI one, obviously. Yeah. It's very collaborative. It's very because it's not just he doesn't just have me on as a guest. You know what I mean? Like there's so many episodes in there of just talking about very like what I really like about the community, and this isn't just me like being a shill for the
sure,
community. I'm not even a top like I contribute what I can afford
sure,
extra, but I just like all the different how you'll pull somebody on and sort of interview them about their interest, and sort of how it ties in to the overall community. I think that's really cool. Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the hardest things about crowdfunding, number one, is the negative perception of it from years past, massive
hmm
bands. Because I remember there were bands that they'd have to crowd. There was a while where a label would require a band to crowdfund because, like,
right,
if a label can figure out a way to do it dirty, they will, right? Like, yeah,
hmm
we'll have you crowdfund the release, but then we'll put our logo on it for you, right?
yeah, and
Uh
then they take everything else that comes in after that.
yeah,
You know,
and it's like I think the biggest issue with it is just band dudes typically are not accountants.
hmm
And so being able to predict the shift in number one, like the global market of goods and services, and being able to
hmm
predict how much things are going to cost to produce, you know,
yeah,
um, I know you experienced that a lot with, Omni because it was one of Omni's part 1 and 2 because it was,
It's so
there
much
was a lot of
inflation.
global shift, yeah,
So
between
much
when you
inflation.
started that campaign
Yeah.
until, you hit fulfillment and you were like, "Okay, woof, at least we got the people what they ordered."
Yeah.
Right? But
Totally.
but at what cost? A lot of it I know almost never comes out, you're not making out like a fat cat,
No,
at
you're
the
just
end of it.
surviving to get through it,
Yeah,
and I wouldn't be able to do it without the Patreon, you know,
sure.
because you just look at the sheer numbers, like, so you're taking the profit on the merch items, and you have to spend that on all the other stuff.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like the recording and all that goes into that, which isn't that cheap, and the production of all the stuff that people bought, and then people don't realize that fulfillment itself is a lot of money, thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars in postage.
Mhm.
And I'm not doing this all by myself. There's got to be people paid to do the process,
Sure,
and that there's a lot that goes into all of the above.
sure.
I just I looked at the number that we're trying to hit, which is 100K, and I think that sounds like a lot of money to people. But when I think about it, I'm like, dude, it's not enough.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's not enough. And like, dude, we're dancing around a lot of great stuff, by the way. Like, I want to drop anchor on a couple things that you said because I really want people to leave this investment of their time in listening to this with a
Sure.
feel for what's really going on. Like, when you say that the community is collaborative, I say that, you say that. What does that even mean? Well, I worked directly with a half dozen dudes to make an alternate reality game that
Yeah.
those guys made that was really cool that we're going to relaunch as a part of this. And basically, this is just one example. And I drove these ideas, but there's a couple dudes in here that really executed it well. This dude Nate Worrell and this guy Tom Metzger. They really were passionate about it. It's actually Tom Metzger's idea to do this, and my response is like, yeah, as long as I don't have to do everything, because I have too many of the things that I have to
Yeah.
execute here. 2 books, 28 songs. Like that's what I did on the last album cycle. I put out 2 books and 28 songs. 23 on the albums and 5 NFT songs.
Oh, yeah.
We sat down and I storyboarded out this whole thing for the ARG, and this is how it worked. You have to solve this puzzle that's this cryptic video, and then you get taken to this application to apply for work at the Omni Corporation. And if you answer all the questions successfully, you get hired.
Yeah.
And I know people that had to take the test 4 or 5 times before they got the right answers. I wrote the test. And if you read the test and you realize the line of thought that I'm going down, like there's a trick to it, you know what I mean? It makes sense and it's not very hard. But I think it took people a while to understand what I was trying to communicate with the answers to the test.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? The type of people that we were looking for in the Omni Corporation.
Yeah.
So then when you pass the test, you get access to a private social media server. And these dudes built a whole social media platform on there. Because, like, remember, social media is a huge part of the Omni universe.
Yeah.
This is
Yeah.
called Omni Social Media. So you get to go on there, and then everybody that developed it is a character from the music videos, the book, the story. We're all different characters in the social media platform, and we're all in character having conversations about new technologies, developments, apps, all this stuff, right? And within that, there are all these games. There's 7 different games that you could play to solve to get pieces of content that were sort of world building things and all that stuff.
Mhm.
So it's pretty fun. Just a promotional tool for the record, right? Inspired by films like Cloverfield,
Yeah.
back in the day. But really cool. And these guys drove it, and I worked together with them on it. I never would have done something like that with these guys had we not been talking about it on the Patreon community.
Sure. Yeah.
Now, even you, dude, like you don't even know this yet. I'm telling you on this right now,
Uh-oh.
for the first time, and this is kind of an announcement to the world. So we'll do waves of content throughout this pre-order campaign, this crowdfunding. Like I really get into this stuff because it's really fun. This is the other
Yeah.
reason why I like doing this because it's fun. We're gonna do Omni corporate branded merch.
Yes.
So I made the decision. I saw you posting it
What a
over
good
and over
idea
again.
that was. Somebody
Your
came up with,
idea,
yeah.
dude.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
was like, okay, will people buy that? Like,
Oh,
how
yeah.
will people
Dude,
buy
I'll
that?
wear it to work and nobody will even notice because I have
So,
to wear, like, polo stuff.
we have to figure out what is it gonna all look like? What
Yeah.
what stuff are we gonna make? And that'll come later on down the line. You know, the relaunch of the ARG will come later. I have so many plans. You know, people are going in and I'm watching it as we're talking. You know, they're pre-ordering stuff and they have no idea all the things that are coming down the pipe that I have planned.
Yeah.
And I'm just like begging the universe right now. I'm really just begging our fans, not begging, but you know what I'm saying? Like, please don't jump ship now. I
Right.
finally figured it out and we're going to have so much fun together.
Yeah.
And the music, oh gosh, here's the other thing that I wanted to drop anchor on. So it's no secret really that like my approach here is to bring on collaboration, almost like a rap artist, to make this stuff as awesome as it can be. Right. So last time around, you know, we had a bunch of the dudes from the band Norma Jean, a bunch of my dudes, you know, a couple really awesome producers, George Lever and Bo Burchell were a part of the thing. Like I had this huge team of people working on it. It wasn't just me and, you know, guitar players sitting down writing songs, you know, or the band sitting in a room jamming. Not that there's anything wrong. That's great. You know what I mean? But for me, I just like to try new things. I like to be excited and I like to have new input. You know, we had some interesting guest vocalists last time. So Corey got on a song, and
Yeah.
then I had Johannes from Cult of Luna on a song, who's
Amazing.
a
Yeah.
freaking legend. I don't know who I want to invite on to songs yet. We've talked about it on Patreon. You guys will help me choose who the guest vocalists are, but whoever it ends up being, I want it to be like eyebrow raising. You know what I mean? Whoa,
Yeah.
we got that dude. You know what I mean? But already the guys I'm working with on the music, and we've already started, are eyebrow raising. So Buster Odelholm is going to be in the mix, and he's, you know, Throne, Humanity's Last Breath,
Yeah.
Bill Jarda, others. This guy James Carey, who works right alongside him with their company at Odelholm, who's another great producer. He's worked with bands like Alt, ALLT. I don't know if you've heard them, but they're great. Another Swedish band. Something in the Water in Sweden.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Always
Comes
has
heavy
been.
music. Yep. And I hope I'm not announcing. I mean, these are just guys I've been talking to, right? So,
Yeah.
you know, it could change, but this is who's in the fold right now.
Yeah.
So, and then Kale from Viljarda,
Ooh.
who's the main dude for Viljarda.
Yeah.
I didn't know this, but Viljarda did a cover of one of our songs from PS many years ago. So they
Isn't that crazy?
know and like Project.
Yeah.
He's in the mix. And then this guy, his name's Brian, but he goes by Riff Grimes.
Okay.
He does a lot of the songwriting and production for Scarlord. I don't know if you know him, but it's
Yeah, I
more
know
like a
Star-Lord,
trap
yeah.
metal
But I
thing.
don't know
You know what I
Star-Lord, but
mean?
yeah, I know of yeah.
Well, he lives in LA and he's a longtime project supporter. I didn't know. I reached out to him on Instagram because I saw him doing a thing for Buster's amp, the Thal amp.
Mhm.
And I was like, yo, dude, what's up? And like we ended up talking. And so these guys all know each other. And then Connor, who's one of the Connor McSweeney, who's one of the founding members of Loathe, is also in the mix. So my production team, these are all producers, by the way. So I have a team of like 5 superstar, all world producers already on board to help me in whatever way I need help executing this thing.
That's awesome.
And then I want to bring on like as many guest vocals that are exciting as I can, you
Yeah.
know. I don't know who that will be. So I've got all the ducks in a row. I've got the story already pre-written. The other thing that I've been doing is I'm talking to the screenwriter, a legit screenwriter, Hollywood dude. That's his job. He's got his name on big stuff about turning Omni Part 1 into a screenplay and then shopping it around for, you know, to make it into a film. So there's a lot in play here.
Yeah.
And I'm just going, all right, everybody. I know that we see this much and the box is this big. Dude, all I care about is Spy Hunter. You know what I mean? All I care about is
Sure.
Drawing Black Lines. You know what I mean? If you can see outside of that box and realize there's some really cool stuff going on here, and you don't have to just be a sci-fi nerd or even a metal nerd to appreciate it.
Right.
You know what I mean? And it's still very connected to all the like deep things that drove you here in the first place. Like, dude, I'm being the hype man right now, but I feel like the hype like is not empty.
Yeah. I was very like yeah, we've talked about this a lot of times. I was very blown away by how intricate just the first record was. The first just Omni Part 1 by itself. And then whenever I got Part 2 and it blew the world open even more. Now we have an Omni novel. We have you know what I mean?
Mhm.
We've got all this stuff that really enriches the experience if it's the kind of thing that you're really into. So, as we're moving into Part 3, what do people need to do to get on board to help that happen?
I love that you asked. So
So we're recording this the day everything went live,
right,
in case you
yeah.
guys are wondering.
So obviously the Patreon community is a huge one, and I've been plugging that hard because I think it's a unique experience. I give people their money back if they subscribe for a month and they don't like it. So we have
Yeah.
like 350 episodes in there, all this content. It's really collaborative. Again, I've used that word a million times, and so have you. Like I'm posting T-shirt designs on there before they're done,
Yeah.
and everybody's like, "Oh, I like red better." You know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
Like
Yeah.
so we're going back and forth in that detail. But if you're not into the collaboration element, I also give people who subscribe in the top 3 tiers a 50% merch credit. So like their subscription goes towards that's minus the little Patreon fee. It's a little under 50% at the end of the day, but
Yeah.
half your money goes towards a merchandise credit if you subscribe.
Okay.
And then there's all these other perks that are in there depending upon your tier. Everything from like one-on-one phone calls and different levels of power, being podcast guest. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Exclusive music. There's a song that we just recorded. I recorded it with James from Odelholm, James Carey, and it's a song that's exclusive for the top 2 tiers of the community. It's like an NFT in that sense, but it's
Mhm.
for more than one person. It's for several people, but there's very limited access to those tiers. Only a few people that get those ones. But
Gotcha.
that's the song that's on the
Trailer?
trailer. Yeah,
Okay.
which came out pretty cool. I like that one. It's a nice hint. That's got a little harkening back to the old school, but it's still like heavy. It's really
Yeah.
heavy. So we've got that, and we've got all kinds of other things that we're doing on there. So Patreon is a great way to support. And again, it's foolproof. If you don't like it, you get your money back that first month. I don't think you'll want it, but
Yeah.
you get it. And then obviously the pre-order. We have a ton of pre-order stuff, and we also have all these random experiences. And this is why I like the crowdfund thing too. I actually genuinely like it because it affords you the ability to connect with people in a different way. I'm doing a storm chasing adventure with
Mhm.
a few fans. Like one of the guys the guy who's hosting it, his name's Josiah. He's in our community. He's like an amateur storm chaser, and he sent me videos of him intercepting tornadoes, and one where a tornado landed on him in his car.
Oh, man.
So he's real.
Yeah.
He knows how to track them. I've talked to him at length about it.
Yeah.
And so 2 others are going to jump in a car with he and I in June of 2026 and go chase some tornadoes in Indiana, which is a dream of mine. I've always wanted to do that. I've always been kind of closet obsessed with tornadoes. Hopefully we'll make it back from that, but it will be an adventure for sure, especially if we see any.
So I'm gonna skip out on the storm part. But if you guys are all eating dinner after that, let me know. I'll meet you after the storms are all done.
Where are you located again?
I'm in St. Louis.
Okay, so not that far. Yeah.
Not that well, if you remember, not that long ago, I think it was back in May, I came this close to a tornado. Me and my
That's
family
right.
Yeah, me and my family were at the St. Louis Zoo, and we knew that there were gonna be storms later that day, but we it's funny too because when I was telling you about it, you commented, you're like, because we left, and then the tornado hit the zoo,
Yeah.
and then when we got back to our home, we found that there was a lot of damage around the area. And I remember even you commented, you're like, it's so strange, right? The time that you left was the perfect time to leave
Right.
so that you wouldn't be in either place. But yeah, that stuff is terrifying to me. Like, I mean, we
I
see
don't get
tornadoes
into
out here in the
roller
Midwest a
coasters,
lot.
but man, I will love me doing some storm chasing.
Oof. Well, I
Maybe
hope.
not. Ask me afterwards. I have these. I'm not as knowledgeable about myself as I think I am
Mhm.
sometimes. Like I don't know if you've ever had an MRI. Have you ever had an MRI?
Yes.
Okay, so I've never had one of those, and
Okay.
I injured my shoulder a while ago, and I had to get an MRI recently. Well, I went in for the MRI, and you probably already know this if you listen to the recent
Yeah.
podcast episodes, but I went in for it and didn't even give it a second thought. And I've slept on bus bunks my entire adult life, and those are pretty claustrophobic. Well, they zoomed me into that tube, and I about lost my mind. I was like, nope. That's all I
Yeah.
said. I kept thinking, that Jordan Peele film, Nope.
Mhm.
That's what I was thinking of. I was like,
Ugh.
just nope, get me out of here. And I sat down. I looked at all the people in there, and I was like, does this happen often? They're like, oh yeah,
Oh
very
yeah.
very
All
often,
yeah,
all the time.
there's a certain percentage of the population that just can't handle that space.
Couldn't do it.
Yeah.
I've never been so sure of something in my entire life. Like,
Mhm.
my heart rate and my breathing, like, I thought I was being drowned, and I could not come out of the spiral.
Oh,
And
wow.
I didn't know that I was claustrophobic. So, they got me out of there, and I was like, "I don't think I can do it." And I was like, "Give me a few minutes to collect myself."
Mhm.
And they came back in, and I was like, "No way. There's no way I'm going in there." So, I've since found out that they have bigger machines now.
They do, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm gonna go try it there. That's a sidebar, but I figured people get a kick out of that story.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, and we are winding down. Guys, I'm gonna put links for all of this stuff, the Patreon, as well as the actual merch store where all of the pre-order bundles are live now. There's awesome stuff there. I'm gonna try not to be too much of a shill, but I'm definitely getting that zip up hoodie. Nobody makes zip up hoodies anymore. I hate
Yeah, it's not a
pullovers. I
thing, but
love a zip up
the
hoodie.
only
Oh my
reason why
goodness.
I'm making a zip up hoodie is because Vincent from Patreon was, like, adamant.
Yeah.
He was
Well, I
adamant,
appreciate it.
dude. He hit me up so many times, was like, "Can you please do a zip hoodie?"
Yep.
I was like, "Alright, yeah, we'll do it." Again, Patreon.
Yeah. I don't care what the cost is. I will get a zip up hoodie and I will definitely get corporate wear because like I said, I could wear I because I wear like polo shirts,
Mhm.
like almost like an IT. I work on medical equipment, but
Yeah.
I could wear an Omni tech support shirt
Yeah, I'm
and
wondering if
nobody
we
would
could
even bat an
do the
eye at it.
power symbol maybe, or the
Yeah.
or you mean that power symbol or the mandala thing?
Mhm.
But there's gotta be some more, like, we should do, like, pocket protectors or
That'd be cool.
something.
Omni glasses tape for taping
Yeah,
in the
dude.
middle of your glasses.
Omni glasses tape. What else?
But
There's
we'd
gotta
like
be, like,
there's like put like a little membrane
oh,
in it to where it looks
phone
like there's a
cases,
listening
dude.
device inside of the tape.
Phone cases.
Phone cases. Oh, yeah, that'd be perfect.
Yeah,
I would put that on my phone. Yeah,
totally, totally.
yeah. Well, guys, we're gonna wrap the interview for this. Andrew, thank you so much for coming on. It's always a pleasure chatting,
Dude,
and
you're a good man.
you as
You're a
well,
good
sir.
man, and you guys need to keep checking out this dude's content because he does a great job with his musical analysis and his pop cultural commentary as well. Yeah, and I think more people are gonna find out about your channel here pretty soon because you just keep putting out good stuff.